Hey guys, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'll be doing a tutorial on implementing Google Maps Place Autocomplete inside your React app. To use Google Maps, you will have to get a Google Map API key. I have mine set up already, but I will have all links available in the description below. I also want to point out that you need to enable both Maps JavaScript and Places API on your account for it to work. So let's get started. I'll be spinning up a quick app using Create React App to demonstrate. Here we have the React Places Autocomplete npm package. I'll be using this package because it's much easier to use in our React app compared to the Google JavaScript API. We will be focusing on creating an autocomplete drop-down search bar from this package. At the moment, my application is only returning a div with Google Maps Place Autocomplete. First, let's install the React Places Autocomplete via npm and import it to the top of the file. I'll be showing two ways to load the script, and you can choose your own preference. The first option is to follow the documentation and add the script to the HTML file. Over here is where you'll add your API key. I would only suggest this route if this is a private repository or project. But if you're planning on hosting your application on a third-party site like Heroku, for example, I'll show another way using a script loader library to dynamically load it to the app and how to hide your API key. First, install the package and import it to the top of the file. Now I'm deconstructing the props is script loaded and is script load succeed that was passed in from the script loader. Now we will do a conditional statement to make sure that the scripts have loaded before displaying our content, otherwise just return an empty div. Let's take a look back at the documentation. This package supports parallel and sequential loading. First, let's wrap the component with the script loader. Since the Google API file is over 100 kilobytes, we will use parallel loading and pass the script in an array. Now let's hide our API key. Since we are using the Create React app, we will be following their guide on adding custom environment variables. So let's create a .env file, and the variable must start with React _app_. And over here, you can be adding your own name, but I'll be calling mine Google _map_API. We will be using string interpolation and process.env, which is used to access the environment variable. We have to make sure to add the .env file into our gitignore so that the API won't be displayed on the repository. Now let's remove what we have at the moment and add the Places Autocomplete component. We will need to pass certain props to this component. First, we have value, which will be the input of what the user is typing. Next, we have onChange. This will be called whenever the input value changes to update the state. And lastly, we have onSelect. For this tutorial's purpose, it will be called when the user selects an option using the cursor. I feel like this gives a better user experience. Now let's fill in these props value. We will be using React hooks to create the state. Let's name an address and set address. We will initialize it with an empty string. Next, we will assign the prop value with the address variable. For onChange, we'll create a handle change function. It takes an address as a value and it will call set address to update the state. We'll pass the function as a value for the onChange prop. OnSelect will have the same functionality, but we'll call it handleSelect. And we'll pass it as a value for the onSelect prop. If you stay tuned for my next videos, I'll be expanding more on these functions, so at the moment they may seem redundant, so if you prefer to keep your code dry, you can pass setAddress to both as the value. Now let's add the render function to the Places Autocomplete component's child and have it return an empty div. This render function will receive a few props, so let's take a look back to the documentation. I'm going to copy and paste them to make my life easier. Get input props. This function will return the props that you can spread over the input element. You can optionally call the function with an object to pass other props to the input. Let's take a look back at the example. I'm going to copy what they have, but I'll only keep the placeholder as the additional prop for input. Let's also rename it to enter address. What we'll do next is make a div which will display all the suggestions from our search input. For now, let's add the logic to show that the suggestions are loading. The prop loading is a boolean, so if that's true, and this div, which always evaluates to true, then display the string loading. So we should only see loading when it's loading the suggestions, but once it finishes, we shouldn't see it anymore. Now for the suggestions, since it's an array of objects, each containing all the data from Google Maps API, we will map through each suggestion. Let's add some styling for the suggestion property based on when it's active. Let's pick a red background color for active. And also let's give both the cursor a pointer, and white if not. So now that we have the styling, let's fill in what we will be returning. We'll have a div and pass the prop getSuggestionItemProps. This function will return the props that you can spread over each suggestion item in your autocomplete dropdown. We must call it with the suggestion object as an argument, and optional, we can pass an object to add other props to it. In this case, we'll be adding the style variable we created. Now let's render the suggestions property description, which will display the full address. I'm going to format the document to make sure everything is formatted. Now let's test the final product. As you can see, as I'm typing out an address, I'm getting the autocomplete suggestion dropdown. Using the down arrow key, I can select Tokyo, Japan. And as I mentioned earlier, we can also use our cursor to select from one of the suggestions. Again, this isn't a feature mentioned in the documentation, but I prefer to be able to have both ways as an option to make a selection. So that's all for this tutorial. Please give a thumbs up, subscribe, or share if you enjoyed this video. Also stay tuned for my upcoming videos if you'd like to see how to use this package's utility function of geocode with Google Street View for your React app, or applying some styling to your search bar with Material UI.